Hi, my name is Gordy Hogue, and this is Community Connections. Each of us have stories that help us understand each other and help to bring our community closer together. I have been very fortunate to have met many interesting people who have had a positive, profound impact on our community and far beyond. People who have had incredible life experiences and fascinating stories. Community Connections is about these people and about their stories. I'm sure you'll enjoy meeting these amazing people as much as I have. Thank you. Please enjoy. Welcome to Community Connections. My name is Gordy Hogue, and today's guest is a visionary, get-it-done kind of leader who has been in this community and contributing to it for almost 45 years. He has led the development of our waterfront promenade to the parking lots, to Centennial Park, and to a number of parkettes throughout the community, to name just a few of his many contributions. He cares passionately for our community and has continued to contribute to it and to make sure that the growth of it is positive and engaging and meaningful, given the wonderful natural resource we have. Welcome, Doug Stone, to Community Connections.
Thank you very much, Gordon.
It's a delight.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it's a delight to have you here. Can you talk a little bit about growing up in a small town and what that was like and how that kind of prepared you for all of the contributions you've made to this community?
Well, I did grow up in a small town. I grew up in a little town, farming town called Elmville, about 72 miles north of Toronto. Our family had a very long history. My great-grandfather came from the Irish potato famine. I don't know the exact date, but I believe it was around 1852. So my great-grandfather, Thomas Stone, opened the first store in Elmville in 1859. And our farmhouse, really our farm went from the main street south, half the town from its original inception. Interesting enough, there are 5 generations of Stones lived in our house, which puts historical perspective. Growing up in small town Ontario, probably as your father has some sense of, was quite idyllic. It was basically, you had the free roam of the entire town. Everybody knew you, and it was focused on really family and sports. It was almost exclusively hockey all winter and baseball all summer. And I participated extensively in both and just had a wonderful time and still maintain a lot of friendships. Many of the people I grew up with built their homes by working bees. They would finish their jobs. They worked at small factories in Barrie and surrounding area and come home on the weekends, and they'd all build each other's houses. And many of those families are still living in those houses today, all with a swimming pool, by the way, which was pretty cool. So we were one of the few Catholic families. It was deeply divided in the community. We were one of the few Catholic families, and quickly started a Catholic school, St. Patrick's School. And I went to school there, 2 rooms, grade 1 to 3 in one room, 4 to 8 in the other. I didn't start there till grade 3. And it really, if you saw this small little area about 6 miles south of my home, the education system was not great, but I can assure you the playground taught me more lessons than any teacher would ever let me know, because it was filled with the Murphys, the Kellys, the Shanahans, the Hoolahans, the McGinnis, the O'Neills. So it taught me a lot about social interaction and people and whatnot. And I believe it had an enormous influence on me the rest of my time. I had a great experience when I was 14. I went to Notre Dame College in Wilcox, Saskatchewan to play hockey. And I was, believe it or not, reasonably decent size at age 14, but then everything came to a very abrupt halt growth-wise. And suddenly I was the target of very unruly big people. And anyways, but that experience, leaving home at 14, taking the train to Regina, and coming under the influence of that life at Notre Dame was a life-changing experience for me. It gave me a wonderful appreciation of the people of Saskatchewan and the prairie people. Anyways, back from Notre Dame, went to high school. I did not flourish very well in high school. Grade 13 was a disaster. I basically was only interested in either hockey or baseball. But luckily, I found at the counseling office, believe it or not, a pamphlet on Parks and Recreation at Mount Royal College in Calgary, which was a junior college which had a transfer program. And that I read the brochure and I said, this looks like fun. I really wasn't certain what it was all about, but the description provided me with the opportunity. Anyways, I got into an environment that I flourished, and I finished Mount Royal, transferred to San Jose State, which was one of the top 3 universities in the United States for Parks and Recreation. I'd been accepted at Illinois, Indiana, and San Jose State. And the major decision for me was 2 factors. One, San Jose had 265 clear sunshiny days a year, and foreign students, they only charged $189 a semester. So my time at San Jose State was absolutely mind-opening. It was the height of the Vietnam War protests. It was the height of civil unrest with the African-American community. San Jose State, through Dr. Harry Edwards, led the Olympic boycott. And many of you will recognize that, remember in Mexico City when Tommy Smith, Lee Evans, and John Carlos held their black gloves up. Tom Hayden taught there in New College. Students for a Democratic Society was based out of there. I was not part of, but a keen observer of riots on campus, protesting Dow Chemical, recruiting on campus, making napalm. It was also a wonderful time because it was the hippie generation, of which I thought I was a hippie, but I really was never a hippie. But all the great, wonderful musical bands that played at San Jose State went on to be legendary. Janis Joplin, Creedence Clearwater, all those bands were really based out of that area. But the most significant thing that happened there is I met the great Kobe Tanner, and we were married 1 month after my graduation without any job, without any money, without anything, just crazy optimism. My parents flew to the wedding in California, the first time they'd ever been on an airplane. And as my father said to me, well, where do you plan to live? I said, well, we're living with you. We will, I'll get a job, don't worry about that. And rightfully so, it was a time of great expansion. And I was hired by the borough of Etobicoke in 1970 as the community school supervisor, which was groundbreaking foresight in terms of delivering recreation. All our recreation facilities we attached to schools. So the pools, the community facilities, the theaters. Unfortunately, politics got in the way. The school board and the council fought, and the community school concept really went by the by. It was a very tragic outgoing, but I quickly got promoted, which really I was too young, to superintendent of recreation. It was a 350,000 municipality with 32 full-time employees and about 2,600 part-time. but Etobicoke was the most advanced, in my opinion, most advanced recreation program department in Canada at the time. They recognized early on that money was cheap, similar to this environment right now, and developed a 5-year capital program that we built outdoor artificials, tennis clubs, many, many wonderful facilities that many other municipalities really did not have the ability later on when interest rates got up. So I got experience also on major special events. We hosted the Olympiad for the physically disabled following the Montreal Olympics, 2,600 blind, paraplegic, and amputee athletes. And Pacific Conference Games, we were the first community to host provincial games. We hosted the Ontario Winter Games the first time as the model. And that gave me a real sense of organizing major events. And so things were going along smoothly. I'd been at Etobicoke 8 years. I was now superintendent of Centennial Park, and which was the largest complex of its type in Canada. We were just building the Olympian pool, which was the National Olympic Training Facility. And lo and behold, in a February snowstorm, we were living in the country and picked up the Globe and Mail, and Kobe saw an ad for the Director of Parks and Recreation in White Rock, BC. And she said, "You should look in this." She was from California. I said, "Come on. That's some mining town up north. The rec director there floods the ice and adjusts the satellite for videos." Well, I went to the library. I saw that White Rock had a January mean of 42 degrees. And I called my roommate from university, who was the director of planning for the Cowichan Valley Regional District. And I said, "This is probably a good place to raise my family." I had what I call big time recreation experience, but I grew up in a small town, and the more research I did, and I did a lot prior to coming to my interview, I wrote and got last six copies of the White Rock Sun, and I phoned the city. I got sent the operating budget, and so once I decided I wanted this job, and then when I came for my interview, I remember driving down Johnson Road. It was March the 6th, 1970, and it was 70 degrees. And seeing the ocean and the flowers, I was very serious about getting this job. So had my interview, and we made a decision to relocate, and completely. We sold everything we owned. We moved with suitcases to White Rock. I came out first, and then Kobe sold the house. And after my interview, I think you'll recall, I spent the night at your house. They didn't even put me up at a hotel. So that was our first introduction, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I suddenly realized that there was so much to do, and it was just a eye-opening, fun time, and away we went. And from there, my career in White Rock started.
So talk a little bit about the parallels you saw between Elmville. You alluded to the small town growing up in, and then coming to this community, but then having the experience of working in Etobicoke in a big facility, and then going back to kind of your growth roots. How did that influence you, and how did that affect how you performed and why you chose to come to White Rock?
Well, I think the main lesson growing up in a small town was having an understanding of the dynamics of what makes people feel good. And that when I arrived in White Rock, there were many community organizations that were functioning very vibrantly. The Sea Festival, as an example, they had the Sea Festival ball where everybody dressed up. And those are different times than they are now. But and all the individuals in the community that were and all the small town kind of dynamics that if you didn't understand it, you would think it would be hokey or not slick. I don't know if that's the right word, but to me, it was just wonderful. It's the way communities should work. And having the ability and the, I guess, the drive to say, we can make this place the greatest place on earth, because in my opinion, I'd never seen anything in Canada that came close to it. And so it really started when we started the city. There really was nothing here. Ken Ross had been the previous director, but basically the most he did, I think, was really kind of form an advisory board and really didn't do any work. And at the time, the city had acquired federal funding under a neighborhood improvement program called the NIP program. And they had all kinds of wild, crazy ideas. They were going to build an ice rink in East White Rock. And I quickly tossed all of that stuff out and restarted. We built the playground in Semiahmoo Park. We built the Welcome to White Rock signs. We did all kinds of stuff with that federal money, which was designated for recreation. The intent was they thought they could take the money and then just fix up the works yard. But they soon found out that that was against the rules. But I think to answer your question, it was an understanding that there are a lot of dynamics that exist in town. And these are people, especially people who have lived here most of their lives, and they have close friends. And I understood what made it work. I guess would be the best lesson I learned from growing up in my small town.
And I think that reflected in the way you were able to develop, to move forward, having the experience of Etobicoke and what a bigger system looks like, and being able to take some of the values of a small town community and be able to work within that framework to achieve so many things in terms of the evolution and growth of this community to what it is today. So do you want to talk a little bit about the Promenade, which is certainly one of the forefronts and one of the significant projects that you oversaw?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot because people constantly talk about the Promenade, and I feel very proud about my role in doing that. However, I think I'd preempt to say I believe the greatest contribution, at least from my perspective, has been the preservation of Centennial Park, because that, who knows what could happen in the long term to the Promenade on private land. However, what I'm most proud of is there was great pressure to develop Centennial Park, as you're aware. It only, there was a high-rise development planned on for the western 7.5 acres. And I was adamant, and it took some pushing that I included in the OCP every year for 2 consecutive OCPs, which is really 7 or 8 years, whatever it is, that had to be retained as public open space. And we were challenged by the developer. It went to the Supreme Court, I think you're aware of. And the judge, in making his ruling, referred to the OCP in making his decision and awarding us the fact that we could, that land should be retained as parkland. So I believe that legacy. I look at Centennial Park often, but the construction, we used government grants and constructed all the trails through there and whatnot. But so that I feel is the number one thing. Also, maybe just to add to that, the strong decision to, and I fought hard to build the Bryant Park, that basically is a pedestrian walkway concept of a passive park in the town center. There was just a lot of discussion about that as well as Hogue Park, your parents' old home, again, as a linear parkway, and certainly McCod Park, which was the only open green space in the East Beach or the east of White Rock, right in the residential area. So those, I think those are lifetime gifts that will be there forever. But back to the Promenade. How did the Promenade get started? Well, it started by a woman who lived in the old, I think it's called the Brickella building, across at Elm Street, that she complained to me that the broom, so west of the station was the siding, the old siding, but it was used really as a walkway. It was a small amount of paving. And she complained, and in fact, she wrote to council about the fact that she got hay fever every year so bad she got hospitalized. And council ignored it the first year, but the second year, I got her to write a very detailed letter. I shouldn't admit to you that I often did that behind the scenes, that I had residents write letters to council, and sometimes I scripted them myself, which I shouldn't tell you that, but I did it. And so council approved a small amount of money to remove all the old broom that was there from the station to really Elm. And I remember standing there with Merv Hart and the front end loader and cleaning all that stuff out. And I said, whoop-de-doo, we can build a walkway here. And that's really how it started. Then together with, I think yourself when you were mayor, when we initiated the Marine Drive Task Force that I chaired, and received a lot of input, and we had university students from Simon Fraser do research on how do we reduce, at that time was rowdyism and deviant behavior and drinking and all those crazy things. And one of it was to improve the environment. And a number of things came out of that. And that provided the justification to not only continue with the development of the Promenade, but also one of the recommendations that came out of that was for pay parking. And and it talked about the value of pay parking in terms of providing turnover for the restaurants, because there was only, I forget how many parking spots, say 1,000 parking spots, but at the peak period, there were 385 employees on the waterfront. So they all parked in the parking lots. So it was counterproductive. So council provided me with $5,000 capital to really start the pay parking program. And I'm quite proud of that because I ran the pay parking, and the pay parking should be operated as a business. It is the city's only source of revenue outside of a small amount of recreation fees and permit fees, but other than anything else, it is its only source of additional revenue. And I took the $5,000 and I purchased all the parking meters from the city of New Westminster. And together with the great late Alex Mellinger, was the only other employee in the parking operation. And when we bought all those meters, many of them were brand new. And he refurbished many of them, and I started a replacement program. I then also sold all those meters, many of them. We sold them to the city of Regina because the new electronic ones would freeze up. I sold them to the University of Victoria. I sold them to Trinity Western University. And we turned that 5,000 into a multi-million-dollar really corporation. That's the way I thought it should be operated and the way I believe it should be operated today. And some of the other accomplishments, I think, one of them was when I moved down to the works yard as operations manager, and we constructed the new operations building, and it was the first LEED, which is the Leadership in Energy Environmental Design, first LEED gold building in Canada. And it was quite hilarious because we had constant tours of construction people and executives coming to tour this building. And because we were able to acquire grants, that $1.6 million building cost the taxpayers the White Rock taxpayers around $442,000. And it was it was a lot of fun. And also, I think the construction, I was responsible for the construction of the police station and the fire hall, both well-designed buildings. And I was also thrilled to not have to pay. We held back $30,000 for the architect that did the fire hall because we were able to determine that his design was horrible, and he admitted it. And so that was fun. So that, I would say those are, I think moving the station was another, sorry, I forgot about that. Moving the station was another very smart thing, not my idea, but I led the implementation. John Atkinson was the one that said, we can't repair this building because the wooden piers underneath it were all twisted and there was not a level part to the entire building. But I did see the effect of creating the open area in front of the station, which has proven to be wonderful, particularly for the museum, who incorporated, again, the concept of selling leaves, which we did at the Totem Plaza, and turned that into a cash flow. So anyways, those were many of the things that happened at work.
And I recall the station moving, and there was a number of volunteers who came in, and I think they'd sandblasted all of the thick paint off the walls, and the volunteers, I think you arranged for a number of volunteers to come in and paint or lacquer the walls naturally, and the fumes from them were quite intoxicating, as I was one of those volunteers, but I know a number of them were quite intoxicated as a result of that, and went back to eat a lot of food and try and sober up as a result of working in the station, volunteering.
It was a joyous project.
A joyous project. You also had some business interests in terms of your work with television production and golf along as a parallel and a contributing part of bringing some interesting people to our community. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes. When I was in Etobicoke, one of the individual that interviewed me for the job discovered that I was a golfer. So I don't know whether I got hired because of my degree or my golfing abilities. But he had started to work when CBS television came to Toronto to do a golf show for the PGA Tour at the Board of Trade Club, and wrote to CBS. And then CBS television ended up hiring us to do all of their television work for golf, of which that time there was only 6 tournaments. And they were only on air from Saturday and Sunday for 1 hour. There was no cable network. And so our schedule would be, we still were working at Etobicoke, but we would finish work on Thursday night. We'd fly to, let's say, Fort Lauderdale on Friday, get there as quick as we can. We'd rehearse with our crew. We'd do Saturday, Sunday, get a Sunday night flight, and we'd take 1 day vacation. And so we did all of their tournaments. And ironically, as we talked, the Masters is on. So I had the opportunity to work at Augusta numerous times. The final time I worked at Augusta was in 1994, I think, which was the first year they ever did a high def show in North America. And they did a separate broadcast, and I worked specifically with on the high def network. But my television company, I also worked in Toronto with Hockey Night in Canada for a number of years. I worked the first year of Blue Jays baseball, the very first game in that first season, of which there was only 16 games televised on Wednesday night. Had the opportunity to work with Don Chevrier and the great Tony Kubek. And I did CFL football for CBC and TSN. And so that my television work has taken me all over. I worked for Channel 4 in England doing the Dunhill Cup. I went to Buenos Aires to work on the World Cup of Golf, Puerto Vallarta at the World Cup. And my final 5 years after I retired from White Rock, I produced, for 5 years, I produced 14 half-hour shows for the Golf Channel called Chasing the Dream, about the Canadian Golf Tour. And so, yeah, it was, I called it my hobby. And one of the great lessons I think about it is that I talk to my children about following their passions. It was just fun. I never worried about money. I never worried about anything. And the end result, it became quite successful because, and it was a tough business to work in because it's very connected. And I found one of the principles was, one, I wasn't doing it for the money. And secondly, I was always honest with people. And a lot of people will give their right arm or sell anybody out to go to the Masters for the week, get all your accommodation paid, play it on Monday, which I did twice. But I developed trust with a number of key people. And so it was a bit of a lesson in that. It'll do you well in life. Just be straight up, and might not be the most comfortable all the time, but clearly you'll probably be successful.
And those contributions that you've made in many of your life experiences have all reflected themselves extremely well in the evolution of this community and the growth of this community that you've been able to contribute with your directness, with your honesty, with your forthright approach, but also with the experiences that you've had that gave you some visionary perspectives on what could happen. So as you see our community developing now, what do you see somebody who might be watching this sometime in the future? What do you see for the future of this community, and what are the things or the values that we have to hold on to ensure that the kind of things you've expressed are still an integral part of the growth of this community?
Well, I think a couple of things. Where communities, I think, generally thrived, and I think in your previous podcasts with Finn Coyne and with Wayne Baldwin, I listened to both of them carefully because both of them brought back many memories to me about things that I had forgotten about. But I think where municipalities have lost something, and I'm not certain which one of those two gentlemen referred to this, but if you take the early years when I started at White Rock, with first Don McDonald was the mayor, then Tom Kirstein, then Gordon Hogue, then Hardy Staub, and my final mayor I worked with was Judy Forster. Where things changed, and where I think they've changed in the future in regards to municipalities, those first 5 gentlemen that I met or referenced all really ran for office as a public service. And I believe one of the things that has changed, becoming an elected official now has become a job. People are getting, it's their source of income. And it changes the manner in which decision-making is made, in my opinion. Certainly, in the early days, when much happened in this city, major developments, I suggest the Promenade would never be built in today's environment. It would never be built because the people that were elected to council and to mayor did it as a public service. And what they did is they established policies, they established bylaws, they hired competent people and allowed them to deliver services based on those policies and bylaws. But the minute the elected officials start interfering in the day-to-day operation, it produces chaos, and it also produces staff that are afraid, I think, especially if someone is working in a position, has a family and whatnot, and the politician is talking to you directly, it takes some gumption to say, no, we're not doing it that way. We're doing it this way. And so I think that's one of the significant changes, and I don't know how that can be changed. In regards to our own city, I think the major issue is that financially, the city, I believe, has many hurdles to come over, because you cannot continue to tax to the level that we're being taxed. And there's not a mindset to provide the levels of efficiency that should happen in a community that's only 3 square miles. I certainly believed you can develop a team to deliver the service. And in this small space, everybody should be pulling together. You should be able, everyone should know what's going on about it, every small thing. So I think the pressures will mount, not only just for White Rock, but many municipalities. I think municipal government is one of the last bastions that has not been looked at critically in regards to expenditures and management. But I still believe with all my heart that no matter where Kobe and I go, we come back and sit in my sun porch and say, why did we leave here? Because often, or we say we're sitting somewhere else and looking out and saying, this is it. I think White Rock's better than this place. This community has provided me the opportunity to, and I made a conscious decision to stay here and raise my family. I believe I was capable of moving on in this profession, but the ability to work really hard, yet stay close, to coach soccer, to coach Little League, to coach high school golf with my son, to do all of those things. I never regret one moment of it, ever.
And as a community, we're ever so grateful that you did. You've made many contributions to this community, and hopefully you're a proud citizen, because we're certainly proud of the contributions that you have made and continue to make in ensuring that this community is a welcoming, positive place. And certainly we've all got interesting challenges as communities and as governments, but hopefully we'll see in the future that we'll continue to reflect the values that you have reflected. So thank you so much for all you've done and for being a guest on Community Connections. Thank you for joining us today on Community Connections. Please tune in to our next show as more amazing people share their wonderful stories. If you haven't already, please click on the red subscribe button below, right down there, and view our updates. Feel free to leave any thoughts or comments that you may have. We're always trying to do a better job of connecting this wonderful community. Thanks again for joining, and until next time, keep connecting. Thank you.